Jo is an experienced NED, board chair, chief executive, and social entrepreneur, committed to creating value and impact. As the principal of Jo Kavanagh Consulting, Jo provides strategic advisory services to aspirational leaders and organisations seeking to be future-focused and grow their impact for social and economic justice and change. She has extensive executive and board-level experience and a track record for successful innovation, enterprise, and impact with purpose-driven organisations. Jo's title for her keynote today is Change Does Happen, Past Lessons for Future Success.
Thank you, Sophie. And as you can see, I've changed it up a little from this morning. I found it really difficult up on the stage, and the echo was really bad. So hopefully this is also a bit closer and a little bit more connected with each other to make it possible for you to engage as well. So thank you for joining me this afternoon and for seeing the distance on what's probably, like me, your first big day out in a long time. You're doing well to still be here. Let me start by again paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people whose lands we are gathered on, and acknowledge all elders past, present and emerging, and express our appreciation to learn from First Nations culture and people. I'm going to provide a very traditional address for you today because we're going to step back in time. No PowerPoint slides, just an opportunity for you to perhaps listen and try and connect with the message that I'm sharing with you today that I bring to give you. We're going to step back in time first to the 1970s and 80s to share a story of significant change making. You have to picture me as much younger, with dark hair and looking a little more youthful overall. During my 20s and 30s, I graduated from university and commenced working as a social worker in institutions and substitute care settings with vulnerable children, and sometimes we got to work with their families, but rarely. I was part of that care system, and it was in those roles that I began to hear disturbing and heartbreaking stories directly from children and young people about abuse happening to them by the adults charged with looking after them and keeping them safe. Each child's story was seen as unusual, and there was no system for responding other than with a framework of employer-employee relationships and responsibilities. These were children handed by the courts into the care of the state and then placed through various charities into foster and residential care settings. The system itself was very well intentioned, and the majority of people did provide the best we could for children with the knowledge and resources we had at the time, which was very limited. Just imagine, at that time, there was no Googling. There was no idea of an internet. We were excited when the fax machine was invented. Even making interstate and international phone calls was a challenge and very expensive. Letter writing and the post was essential. Yet this is only 40-odd years ago, a time when sharing knowledge and research relied on publications and conferences. When I learned that the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect was coming to Sydney in 1986, and that there were researchers from US and Canada presenting on the abuse of children in substitute care, I was desperate to attend. And I think at that stage I might have been to Sydney twice in my life. Fortunately, I found a philanthropist who was prepared to support me to attend. My husband and I drove to Sydney with 2 little children and a third one on the way, and I was able to connect with these researchers talking about an issue which really just had no traction here. The abuse of children in care was not discussed as a systems issue, and in fact, children who shared such experiences were rarely believed. The most vulnerable needed to have developed trust with someone in order to speak up, and then there was no guarantee of actually being heard. The international research found that children were 7 times more likely to experience abuse as a result of being in care institutions away from their families. 7 times more likely to be abused. So this was no small problem. Armed with this evidence, by 1989 I successfully applied for a Churchill Fellowship, and again with the assistance of philanthropists and raising all the cash my husband and I could, we set off, now with 4 children, for our first trip ever overseas, following a research trail around the US and Canada. We returned after 3 months with information, boxes of resources, nothing on a USB stick, and training guides, all sent home in great big boxes via the post, to share for improving the care of children in Australia. The knowledge was embraced by government and non-government colleagues, and reforms and practice changes rippled out through the system. With the engagement and contribution of many, concern for children in care grew into a movement for change. This is the following timeline that happened, and I quote, "In 2004, an Australian Senate inquiry revealed a history of neglect and cruelty, of abandonment and exploitation that left approximately 500,000 Australians, as well as many child migrants, physically and psychologically scarred." The Australian government, with Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister, delivered the national apology to the forgotten Australians in 2009, an incredibly emotional experience that was broadcast across the country live, and I don't know if people in the room remember that. It was so moving. And by 2012, Julia Gillard, as Prime Minister, announced the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Sexual Abuse, which reported in 2017. And then the National Redress Scheme was established to compensate victims and survivors. And then we have the hashtag Let Her Speak campaign. And in 2021, Grace Tame is Australian of the Year. She is fiercely advocating for justice for victims of child sexual assault and children and women's right to be heard and be safe. As she has now famously said in receiving the award, and definitely lived up to for the past 12 months, she will not be silenced, she will be heard, and Australia, make some noise. This is change at scale of extraordinary significance. Children's rights are now articulated, and expectations and standards about the safety and care of children have improved dramatically. Laws have been changed. Attitudes and behaviours have changed. Unfortunately, the job is not finished. There are still causes for alarm about particularly the prevalence and treatment of First Nations children and children from families living in poverty, many of whom are also First Nations people. So whilst we hold that need close, let's also purposefully zoom in on this as one story of dramatic change, dramatic systems change, to call out lessons which are relevant for future success, and with an emphasis on speeding up the pace of change. We can't afford for action on today's urgent issues to take another 23 years. So again, while not blind to the continuing challenges and problems, I'm purposely focused here on the strengths to support future success for positive change. I think there are three key behaviours, lessons in that story for micro, personal and macro efforts for fairer, safer, equitable living and a better society. I propose the evidence supports the value of these behaviours for how we take action to get beyond ideas to impact and beneficial outcomes. From this first case study of preventing the abuse of children, let me propose the value of these three simple behaviours, but often hard to maintain, to progress solutions for complex problems. To listen, give and connect. Listen, give and connect. Listening to children is what led me and many others to becoming aware of and understanding the problem. We needed to understand being in care from a child's perspective and to hear their lived experience. Grace Tame has now educated everyone by sharing her story of sexual abuse and perpetrated grooming by a teacher in a school. She has made it very real as an articulate young woman, graphically explaining the details of what happens in the process of abusing vulnerable children in many different settings. However, if you attended the National Women's Safety Summit this year, the federal government's response to various scandals, you might also have heard Professor Marcia Langton, who was on the First Nations Women's panel, as they called for their own national safety plan. She said, and this is a well-recognised, accomplished academic and Indigenous elder, she said, quote, "No one listens to us." It was such a powerful, poignant and painful moment. No one listens to us. So that is something we can all help to change. Giving me agency to act, access to money for me to learn and then give back and share with others, this is true for many seeking to research, innovate and grow positive change. In the business world, there are special funds and tax concessions which are provided for such research and development. Philanthropy is key to enabling such initiatives for social, economic and environmental change. However, we need more giving for innovating at scale and for it to become systematic and systemic and provide the evidence base for policies and government reform. Generosity, sharing and giving is core to community wellbeing and for progressing a fairer society. Connecting with the evidence and others passionate about the same issue creates momentum and grows the knowledge base for reform and change. We can be intentional about contributing and being part of collective action and lifting everyone together. Currently, we are seeing women journalists and filmmakers who have joined with today's feminists and advocates to highlight and elevate their messages for equality. They are connecting the issues and sharing the evidence via all communication channels, articles, books, documentaries, social media, podcasts, etc. Just a few examples. We have Jess Hill's book, which has been made into a 3-part documentary on the crisis of domestic abuse called See What You Made Me Do. We have the Strong Female Lead documentary, further exposing misogyny in Australian politics and the treatment of Julia Gillard. Misrepresented by Annabelle Crabb on the gendered nature of Parliament and democracy. And just this week, if you happen to see Australian Story, we had Grace Under Fire about Grace Tame and the impact of her Australian of the Year award. This is to name but a few to illustrate the powerful connections across domains and disciplines to speed up and scale up efforts for change. Together, they are louder and more influential. So just as listen, give and connect were key to my own micro contribution, I suggest they were also significant at the macro level for the wider systems change process to do better for vulnerable children. And importantly, we now have so much more we can bring to problem solving and progressing positive change. The growth of knowledge, theories and frameworks and digital tools gives us the capacity to move faster and better, whilst at core we still need to get the basics right. We still need to listen, give and connect. In line with my own life journey, my current priorities include the increasing vulnerability of women as they age, or as we age, I should say. We have the data on homelessness and the impact of COVID on women. Women's homelessness rose 27% between 2006 and 2016, before the pandemic, with women over 55 being the fastest growing cohort of people experiencing homelessness in Australia. It's a disgrace. And this growth is driven by structural and systemic gendered inequality. To understand this better, I led a small community-based research project to explore the data with women aged over 55 in 2018. We applied human-centred design principles to listen and collect data from women with lived experience of ageing and to participate in identifying possible solutions. The women confirmed what we called the 5 Ds, which are increasing their vulnerability as they aged. And I'm not going to explain them all, but disability, domestic violence, death of a partner, divorce, and dearth of dollars. They're all factors which then intersect with mental health and well-being and create a perfect storm of vulnerability for women as they age and find themselves in poverty and homeless. Excitingly though, women all across society are talking, listening and designing solutions. I'm a proud member of the Melbourne Women's Fund, a women's collective giving circle where we pool our donations of money and time to support grassroots organisations taking effective action to provide housing, pathways to employment and end violence against women and girls. Our recent Grants Awards Night, which you can find on the website, was just an inspiring evening, and it also facilitated connecting those groups with each other to leverage and elevate their combined efforts for greater impact. So listening and giving are core to those change processes. It needs to be headline news that women have carried the greatest load through COVID. 55% of job losses due to COVID are women. The majority of essential workers have been women, and they are in the lowest paid jobs. Women depleted their superannuation savings at a higher rate than men, and the majority of casual workers unable to access JobKeeper were women. Women also performed more of the unpaid labour and the additional education support for children in the home during lockdowns. So COVID-19 is a gendered problem. We have the data, but it is still not well known or understood. Hence, I'm also proud to be part of a project with the Just Gold Social Enterprise Creative Agency in partnership with the City of Melbourne for the Invisible Woman. Our objective is to continue the research and grow the conversation through all communication channels about changing the vulnerability of women. And in tune with Grace Tame and others acting for a gender equal society, we are amplifying and engaging across Melbourne and Australia and determined to make some noise. You might like to check out our hashtags, The Invisible Woman and hashtag Stay Visible. We're keen to connect up with everyone who's interested to progress the solutions to prevent vulnerability and support women to be living safely and securely as they age. So in summary, I believe that by casting our eyes across examples from the past and the present, we can see that listen, give and connect can provide a cohesive way forward across cultures and sectors, because we need to emerge from the COVID pandemic and disruption, intentionally shaping a fairer and better society. So my final word is a plea to our government, at the federal level in particular, to employ these core 3 behaviours, to listen to the experts reporting on the impact of JobKeeper data for lifting people and children out of poverty. They have the data that proves it. And to progress generosity as the basis for policies and programs to connect all disadvantaged groups into wellbeing. The evidence is in. The data from the Great JobKeeper experiment demonstrates giving people financial and housing security solves and prevents high-cost social problems. So why don't we raise the rate on JobSeeker to JobKeeper and have everyone live above the poverty line? Is it that we worry not everyone is deserving of our dollars and support? Well, let's leave that humanitarian argument to one side that's about doing the right thing. The evidence is here and internationally that generosity is also the smart thing to do for better economic management of public funds. It is a more economically sound approach and benefits everyone. So we could move forward into a better and fairer society if they listen, give and connect. Thank you.